Welcome back! After the Battle of France, the next step for Germany in World War II was the Battle of Britain, which took place mostly in the air, over the British Isles and nearby waters. The Luftwaffe wanted to overwhelm the Royal Air Force, gaining air superiority, which was the basic requirement for invasion. After that, a peace treaty could be signed, with a British retreat from the German-dominated continent. Let's see what happened instead. Even before the French defeat, Hitler expressed his desire to make peace with England. He was most likely still dreaming of a pact that would secure Germany's continental empire. Instead, most Allied troops were evacuated from Dunkirk. Churchill delivered his famous speech in the House of Commons on the 18th of June, and the majority of his cabinet refused to consider an armistice, even though Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax favored negotiations. Peace in France came on the 25th of June, as German troops occupied the Atlantic coast and the last Allied troops were evacuated through Brest, Le Havre, and other ports. The Luftwaffe caused some losses, but failed to prevent the escape of around 200,000 men. The Channel Islands were already occupied. It was time to focus on the main target. Even during the Dunkirk evacuation, the RAF provided better fighter cover, although the distance made it difficult for their planes to spend more than 10-15 minutes over France, giving a significant advantage to their German opponents. Not to mention that Fighter Command was saving the modern Spitfire fighters for the next phase. While their ground troops suffered as a result, this was still a wise decision. Once the entire French coast was in their hands, Hermann Göring ordered the Luftwaffe to destroy the RAF and block British ports in cooperation with the Kriegsmarine, although Grand Admiral Erich Raeder warned that a proper invasion could only take place in early 1941. Both fighter and bomber units were moved closer to the sea and prepared for the initial phase of the battle. In early July, planning for the invasion was ordered, but on the 19th, Hitler tried to appeal to common sense in his speech without suggesting negotiations. In London, this was interpreted as an ultimatum, so there would be no peace offer from either side. Directive number 17 was then issued by Hitler on the 1st of August. It determined that air superiority was needed over southern England to maintain the threat of invasion. After losing about 500 pilots in Norway and France, the RAF could muster 1,100 for the battle, while the Luftwaffe could rely on almost 1,500 experienced pilots. On the German side, the main fighter was the MO-109E, which had sufficient speed and a great climb rate to be superior than most British opponents. The Me-110C was originally used as a heavy fighter, just like the Bristol Beaufighter on the opposing side, and a long-range escort, but it lacked maneuverability to defend itself against the Hurricane Mark I or the less numerous but more capable Spitfire Mark I, which were the workhorse of RAF Fighter Command. The Defiant was already outdated, and although its turret surprised some German pilots, it soon suffered heavy losses. When it came to bombers, the Germans could send Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers to England, but they were too slow and required constant fighter cover, so they were soon redirected to raids on shipping. In level bombing, the Dornier Do-17 and the Junkers Ju-88 were used, the former being the slowest and lightest, while the latter was much faster and could escape some fighters when in trouble. However, the Heinkel He-111 was used in much larger numbers, as these could carry the heaviest payload. The RAF used outdated bombers during the battle. The Ferry Battle and the Bristol Benheim were light bombers, while the other three types, the Armstrong Whitworth Whitley, the Henley Page Hamden, and the Vickers Wellington, were used against industrial and transportation centers in France, mostly in night attacks. Luftflotte 2, 3 and 5 were ordered to attack southern England, Wales and northern England, along with Scotland. German intelligence was lacking, They did not have reliable information regarding the enemy's real strength and industrial capacity. They would continue to underestimate British capabilities, while their opponents would overestimate German strength. The main assault commenced on Adlertag. Escorts were ordered, while raids on radar stations stopped as they were deemed unsuccessful, and luring the British out into the open was preferred by many. In the second half of the month, aircraft factories and ports were bombed, along with suburban areas, while night raids were conducted against smaller towns and nearby factories, but bombs also landed in central London, likely by mistake. Fighter command could not be knocked out, and while replacing experienced pilots was extremely difficult, the inclusion of Polish, Czech, and other foreign volunteers helped, while the dowding system provided speedy and accurate information from radar stations and observers to commanders who could dispatch nearby fighter squadrons to confront the enemy. Pilots who had to bail out could be rescued and returned easily, while German pilots faced captivity or drowning, although their existing system for sea rescue proved to be much more efficient. After 2 critical weeks in late August and early September, the British could once again replace their losses in fighters, while with newly trained reserves, the number of available pilots even grew. They in fact had more pilots than the Germans, who could barely replace their own losses. British bombers attacked residential areas in Germany, even Berlin, after which Hitler withdrew his previous directive and allowed the bombing of London. On the 7th of September, 400 bombers and 600 fighters raided London, but this change in focus, the so-called Blitz, gave time for the RAF to recover. A week later, a massive German attack was repulsed with heavy losses. After that, the Luftwaffe gradually switched to nighttime bombing. Hitler rejected calls for a bombing campaign against residential areas. He still believed that continued attacks against infrastructure, the arms industry, and fuel and food stocks could achieve the desired result. He did not cancel plans for invasion, but ordered a reduction in work on Operation Sea Lion, seeing that air superiority was still not achieved. The bombing campaign reached its peak in October and November. The main targets were ports and storage facilities, while a small Italian contingent arrived with Fiat CR-42 and G-50 fighters, along with a few Fiat BR-20 bombers. They did not achieve much. Their participation was more a gesture than actual help. By September, Luftwaffe losses reached roughly 50% of their initial strength. Their training program was unable to replace losses in pilots, so the men were not rotated, unlike their British counterparts, who continued to grow in numbers. Historians disagree about the actual numbers. It seems that the Germans lost 2,000 planes by October, while the British lost around 1,600, but we can say that overall, the RAF managed to recover and then further expand, while the Luftwaffe struggled to maintain its existing level of readiness, and preparations already started for the next campaign, Operation Barbarossa. Sea Lion, the naval invasion, in which the Kriegsmarine never believed, was finally postponed to the spring in mid-October, then cancelled in December. As the Luftwaffe failed to overwhelm the British defenses, the island could later become a base for Allied ground, air, and naval forces. They would have to invade the continent and liberate its western portion, something that would require years of hard work and many sacrifices. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.